Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is David Lipsey. I'm the chair of the Henry Stewart Digital Asset Management Conferences, and today I'll be moderating the next webinar in our series that we present through the Continuing Professional Development Room. The webinar is sponsored by Cloudinary, and our title today is Using an End-to-End Approach for Digital Asset Management. For the many professionals who've joined us around the world to listen to this, we all probably have a different idea and a different meaning of what end-to-end means. The phrase digital end-to-end, or DETE, was pioneered certainly by the studio community in Los Angeles, and it's been adapted as a model that all of us can aspire to, and all of us continue to learn with agility what that means. Our first presenter today is Neda Agmam, who's the Director of Product for Cloudinary, our sponsor. A couple of rules of the road while I introduce Neda. We have the ability for each of you to contribute questions, which I will moderate and pass along. Some of them will respond to directly over the GoToMeeting utility. The webinars are all recorded and they're available for reuse. We welcome that. Neda joins us from Israel today, where she's had a long career in technology, starting first more on the development and R&D side, and for the last several years as a product manager. I'm sure that many of us on the call have had the opportunity to either perform that role or listen to someone who is in that role, and is kind of like the traffic cop on a complex rotary where technology interest, business interest, analyst interest, customer interest, perhaps first and last, come together and has to have someone there to be the traffic cop. Neda's in that role. She's a translator. She enjoys the versatility and diversity of professionals that she gets to interact with. And right now, Neda, we get to interact with you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, David. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm happy to be here. Okay, so let's talk about our end-to-end approach for digital asset management. I guess that most of you are already familiar with digital asset management in some way or other. I'll run through a brief history of how it evolved and how it kind of leads to the next generation of DAM. So in the beginning, DAM was all about the need to store and organize assets. So you could say it was more like a sophisticated file system. It could be a cloud-based system. You could upload assets to a central location and store them securely, organize them in folders, categories, and tag them, browse them, or even search for files that you know are there or you think they'd be there. And then teams started to grow. So with that also grows the need for more sharing files and versioning and collaborating, perhaps different permissions to different people. And in bigger organizations, there could also be more complex approval processes. And then environments became more data-driven. So we invest in creating or acquiring content, but the important part is also to understand how this content performs. So who downloaded it, who viewed it, what converts better. In other words, what works and what doesn't. And the last piece of the puzzle, the content is usually delivered somewhere. I mean, a website, a campaign. It needs to look good on any device, and it needs to be delivered fast to any location, globally, and in any network conditions as well. So what actually happened? Things got complicated. I mean, it used to be a few people with few devices, but now there are a lot of contributors. There's creative designers, marketers, agencies. All of these people are responsible for creating content. They create more content, and they're also creating it in many different types of assets. There are a lot more types than before. Images are kind of the basics, but video is becoming more and more important for conversion. Animated GIFs are popular. There are also other traditional content, such as documents, presentations, PDFs, and so on. So all these assets are eventually delivered somewhere. we still need them, I mean, for print in high resolution for brochures, but we also want them available in desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone, TV even. And there's so many new devices all the time with different resolutions and sizes, colors, and even shapes like the iPhone X. It's hard to keep up with all of that. DAM systems today are very good at handling so many contributors and different types of assets. We believe that the next generation DAM should also be an enabler for this end-to-end supply chain. There are actually different groups of people in the organization who typically handle these types of things, and we think it's important to bridge the gap between the asset management and content delivery. So in a bit more detail, what is this life cycle? How do we see the life cycle itself? The assets are typically uploaded. They could be uploaded from anywhere. They could be synced from a local drive. They could be cloud drive, social accounts, or anywhere across the web. You want them to be saved securely and backed up, and maybe manage versions, and perhaps even when they're uploaded, you would want to moderate them and make sure there's some sort of approval process or rejection. The assets would then probably be organized. I mean, there are folders and subfolders, and maybe tagging, categorizing, maybe automatic tagging, some AI for identifying dynamically what the assets contain. Editing metadata, some of it could be manual and some of it could be extracted automatically from the assets, such as location, camera details, when a photo was taken. And then the next step would be to actually use this this amazing collection of assets and to find relevant images for campaigns or for a homepage to repurpose your content. So for that, you may want to search by any criteria, search by tags, categories, metadata, or even the automatic content that you've identified, or by colors or by faces. And after you've found the images you want, or the assets you want, manipulate and optimize them. They need to be made to fit to different variations by resizing, cropping to different resolutions, or applying different effects to meet design requirements, or maybe add watermarks for protecting them, and so on. Review. There are large organizations, and even if they're not too large, there would typically be some sort of collaboration, internal work on the asset. Maybe want to write some comments or approve an asset before you share it externally. Sharing and distribution of the asset is maybe with a third-party agency or a social network or campaigns, or even publishing it on a website. And last but not least, we have the actual performance. To get insights on how the content is performing, how many views it gets, downloads, shares, and so on. So this is how we see the full life cycle of the asset, from upload through to delivery, and measuring performance and making sure that the whole process is working well. And in order to manage this properly, from upload to delivery, we need to first streamline, make sure that we're streamlining the internal operations and helping teams collaborate and manage content together. And second, improve the end user experience. And the challenge here is probably to make this done independently without compromising the actual quality of the content. So now I'll hand over, let's hear from Karen, who will walk us through how this was done at HBO.
Great, Karen. Thanks so much for joining us. Many of us have had the privilege of hearing Karen speak at the various DAM and other conferences, and have witnessed the leadership that she's brought to our field in setting up one of the most innovative operations against a DAM background, known as the screening room at Discovery, and subsequently many contributions at HBO. Karen, how about a little bit more about your background, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us.
My role at HBO is really the end-to-end life cycle of HBO photography. We shoot two types of photography. unit photography, which is cameras rolling, and gallery photography, which is sort of my home screen right here from all the key art campaigns. And I'll pull it back into what David was just saying about how technology has changing, because I can go walk down 42nd Street in New York City and I can pass 4 kiosks that are flattened files of our key art. And then I can go a half a block in another direction towards Grand Central and see the Curb Your Enthusiasm poster on a digital kiosk. And it's a very different way that we had to shoot that photography. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that. So just taking you through a little bit of what we do. So why digital end-to-end is so important. Rich media assets are being created in much larger volume. The social presence across HBO and other people is so important. We no longer just do a physical buy, but we do digital buys. As Neda was saying and David was alluding to, technology is so important to maintain it. Otherwise, we would just be adding bodies to how do we slice and dice, as Neda was saying, one asset into multiple platforms. So technology tools and integration. And we've seen with HBO that 30 to 40% more page views when content is accompanied by a video or photographic asset. So we're very keen on having our rich assets support us. So what's the landscape look like at HBO? It's platform usage. We are pushing, as everybody knows, our HBO Go Now platform, and the same image has to go out on a Mac, Samsung, a Roku, a Sling, an Xbox, an iPhone, an iPad, and Apple TV. So how do I dynamically distribute content to those multiple environments? So going digital end to end. When I took over, I've been with HBO for 8 years, but the last 4.5, I was in a creative role. And in my very poor introduction, I said how I was sort of in a creative, then I went to IT, and then I went back to creative. I joined HBO back in an IT role, and I was responsible for managing their photo library from a digital asset management technology side. And in doing so, I was very surprised how this team was working in such a linear fashion, but yet the organization and the company was going digital. So I made some pitches to IT to bring new tools and new process and more workflow because marketing could not keep up with it. And in doing so, I had a great relationship with the chief media officer in the marketing department. And after 2 years of being in IT, they asked me to join and lead the photography team from a creative / technology environment. So I moved the last 6 years. My career has been in HBO's marketing team, handling the photography, and I now liaison back with IT. So when I got into this role, it was really about what asset types were we trying to manage, what workflows did we have to support, where was our metadata, where were our business partners, how do we want to collaborate, where's the content coming in from and going to, coming in from Game of Thrones, coming in from Spain, Game of Thrones coming in from Croatia, Ireland, Curb Your Enthusiasm coming in from LA. Where's it going to? It's going to HBO Go, it's going to Amazon, it's going to Verizon, it's going to Comcast, it's going to our own partners, it's going to our own publicists. So I really had to think about those things. Did we have the right resources? And we had some incredible tools, and how can we better leverage them to meet our needs? So this was a really fun eye chart that I sort of throw in because when I took over the department 4 years ago, I looked at all of our workflows. And for HBO, it's multiple workflows. It's a workflow for documentaries. It's a workflow for our films. It's a workflow for our original programming. It's a workflow for our acquired theatricals. And each one of these workflows had a very different, each one of these high-level programming concepts had a very different workflow. A theatrical workflow where we acquire photography from Paramount or 20th Century Fox is a very different workflow than a film or a boxing match. So I first stepped back and looked at all the workflows I was trying to solve. And the biggest workflow we were trying to solve is original programming. Game of Thrones, Veep, Insecure, Curb Your Enthusiasm, those kinds of shows. And I did that and I mapped it out and I said, what are all the touch points in an original programming workflow? And the gray banners represent department staff that was under me. I managed the photographers, I managed the photo producers, I managed the retouchers, I managed the manager of the photo team. But we worked with externally the ad agencies, we worked with externally talent, we worked with internally with media relations and internally with legal. And this was a really telling slide and one that said 1,000 things to me, which was just within my department, we were going back and forth on our process and our workflow. Files came in, they came in via hard drive, they had to get moved to retouching, then we had to get moved to photo and talent. So it was a real good opportunity to say, how do I collapse within my own staff some of these workflows to create efficiency? And hopefully I'll take the next 5 or 8 minutes to show you how we did that. So what workflows were we trying to solve? I was personally trying to solve when I joined the marketing team. What is our photo production? How do we get photography from the field to us in a timely manner? We're shooting in New York City. We have paparazzis everywhere. How do we trump them and get the photography to us sooner so that we can put out a story about Lena Dunham shooting in Brooklyn and not a paparazzi doing that? How do I archive this content? How do I get it out to my agencies who are external and multiple and get them out to them in a timely manner? How do I handle talent approvals when Lena Dunham has a publicist and she wants to then share it with her family or somebody who also looks at her photography? How do I collaborate with my internal and external partners? How does my own staff handle photo editing? How do we standardize metadata? It was a very hard lesson the first couple of months I joined the department because James Gandolfini passed away, and somebody called me at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, we need a photo. He passed away in Europe. And when you typed in James Gandolfini, you got spelled 6 different ways. You got soprano, sopranos, Tony Soprano, Tony Sopranos. So how do we standardize our metadata so that we don't have these problems in the future? How do I understand that? Just how do I opportunize the metadata workflow? How do I create, and to do that and to opportunize it, I went back to the 6 workflows I looked at above. I said, I have a workflow for all these different things. Can I create within HBO a master metadata model? For example, every one of our shows needed season, series, episode, air date. How do I start to create a master model and then break it down by workflow of which workflow needed what metadata? How did I leverage unique IDs? At HBO, at Discovery Channel, where I worked 16 years, and at Sony, where I worked just 2 or 3 consulting, we all had the concept of a unique ID. Unique ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no matter what system it is in an HBO, is Game of Thrones season 6, episode 4. So how do I leverage that of that? In doing so, how do I leverage IT systems of record so that we're not recreating it? And going back to my example of James Gandolfini, how do I manage a controlled vocabulary list? How do I create default fields? I had a full-time metadata person who was tagging metadata. I actually have since when that person left to join another position at HBO, I didn't replace it because by solving some of these breadcrumbs along the way, we solved the need for having a dedicated metadata person. What's a default metadata field? Any original programming workflow we know is copyright HBO, so why should I have to worry about somebody typing copyright HBO and spelling it right? So for every workflow, we define default metadata fields. So this is a little bit of what our workflow looks like in collaborating in a digital ecosystem. In the upper left-hand corner, we start with a photographer. We hire the photographer. When we hire the photographer, we know their name. We know what show they're working on for us. So we've already begun our breadcrumb trail of metadata. We used to receive to the tune of 550 hard drives a year from our photographers. We moved to a cloud tool. By me sending them a digital assignment and them sending it back to me as a digital assignment with that unique ID, I've just gone from 38 fields of metadata to a handful because I've hired the photographer. So I know I hired Helen Sloan for season 8, shooting in Ireland, starting October 24th. Okay, so I know all those things. So I start my metadata there. I hand Helen Sloan, my photographer, the unique ID to Game of Thrones. And when she starts dropping photography to me, I have the ability to create services to other HBO systems of record that brings me back rich metadata, and I can talk a little bit about that. So we hire a photographer. They deliver to us digitally via a cloud collaboration tool. It goes into our cloud collaboration tool, and we use that cloud collaboration tool as our archive, as our editing tool, as our metadata, and as our talent approval. And by harnessing it all in one environment, we're able to maintain our metadata and create, again, rich metadata through our lifecycle. When a talent approves or not approves photography, again, that becomes more metadata. We then send that material onto retouching in a digital workflow. And then after that, we commit the photography through to an HBO storefront, which is a digital asset management application. So just some highlights of what we do. We receive over 1 million assets a year. We work with over 15 ad agencies multiple times a month. Our current archive is about 110 terabytes. We've ingested in the last 4 years over 10 million digital files, because we not only went back to the million plus we were shooting a year, but we went back several years and tried to get all the digital material in that we could. We've had this particular digital tool in place for 3 years, and we've done 86,000 messengers. In the last 12 months, we've done 27,000 digital messengers. And what a digital messenger is, it's a link with imagery, just like as if somebody sent you a link to look at photography through Facebook or something else, but it's a digital link to your photography. And we've had 17,000 unique recipients on our photography. And just to back up again to this slide, my box 2 on the bottom is my collaboration tool, and my box 3 in the upper right-hand corner is my DAM. So our digital end-to-end, as David said, or our digital ecosystem starts with an assignment in box 1 to a collaboration tool in box 2, where we do all of our in and out movement. We're not sure, collaboration with talent, collaboration with legal. And then when we get down to our final set of assets, we commit it to our HBO storefront, which is a DAM. So some recommendations I have from the experience is define your objectives. For HBO, we want to centralize our archive. We wanted to create standardized metadata, which led to better search controlled vocabulary. We wanted to be able to collaborate, because again, going back, 90% of our work happens in box 2. We wanted to have digital approvals. We've had situations where we used to send out binders to talent with a Sharpie pen. They crossed out or circled things that they wanted. And we have had situations where binders have gone astray. So we've gone to complete digital workflows. We wanted to leverage technology, because there's so much opportunity with DAM and technology. And we wanted to create agility to support new lines of business. So just to take you through a little bit of what we do on a daily basis. My staff, we hire the photographer, we choose the days of coverage, we coordinate shoot logistics, and we read the script. Those are all just boxes as a bullet point, because those are things that you have to do just to get your job done. But all the stars are where our digital asset management process happens. Our photo editing, our talent clearances, our archive, our agencies, those all contribute to our digital asset management team. And then I do have a team of supervisors and retouchers that sort of move the content along. So here's again, we're in a very physical process. We've just gotten signed Game of Thrones season 5 in this example. And you can see that between the script, the call sheet, the cast, and the shooting schedule, which is all physical paperwork we get, if we input these into digital systems, all of a sudden we create digital workflows from this. So for example, on the call sheet, I know where people are shooting. I know who's on set that day. If you go to the cast list, you can see, if you blow it up, that Tyrion Lannister is always played by Peter Dinklage. Cersei Lannister is always played by Lena Headey. So again, that eliminates the issue that we had with James Gandolfini's name, where we start to use controlled vocabulary by leveraging HBO systems of record. HBO has a script database. We have a call sheet database. We have a cast talent system. And by leveraging our unique ID and poking into those systems that have this information in, I was able to start to bring controlled vocabulary and digital asset management standards to the HBO photo team. So here's what an assignment looks like. We send a digital assignment out to our photographer. It'll have the assignment date. It'll have the photographer name. It has any project details. And on the right side, you see all the file metadata, the program info, that focus ID, that unique ID I mentioned, the season, series, episode, the requester. This starts to begin by just me sending an assignment out and pre-filling out this assignment and saying, hey, Helen Sloan, you're shooting Game of Thrones for me. Here's your digital assignment. By getting her an assignment digitally, I start to begin my rich metadata library and my digital asset supply chain. Then when the photography gets delivered, just because she's delivered it to me digitally, I start to build an archive. And we came up with a very specific naming convention. If you look to the right of the screen with the photos of Game of Thrones, you can see it says GOT 081715HS. I know that that's Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 3, shot on August 17, 2015 by Helen Sloan. So for all of our shows, we came up with a very specific naming convention, and it's standard across every show, whether you shoot a film or a boxing or Game of Thrones for us. So again, when the photographer digitally submits to us like this screen, and it'll land at HBO, it starts to natively build an archive with no additional effort done by our staff, because we've come up with standards and conventions way out in the assignment phase, which again is this. We then send all this photography out to our agencies, and that was a byproduct, what I call a win, because we had an archive, it was so much easier to send a link to our agencies than to push it back onto a hard drive. So again, building the archive and the byproduct of the win of delivering to our agencies were wins because it was all because we created standards. We then talent approved digitally, and we are looking at future enhancements of photo editing, cast talent tagging in the tool. So this is a little bit of a screen of what our material looks like. What were the wins for us? Quicker time to market, deeper security, all digital workflows. And we went from 500 hard drives to 50 around the department, just in case we have to move something in a strange way. But everything, 99% of our stuff is done digitally. So what does the agency receive? Very similar. The agencies receive a digital file, and we send them, just like this link shows, 2,800 files. And we tell them since we work with 15 agencies and we don't know if they have a small bandwidth or large bandwidth, we tell them how many files they have. We tell them what kind of files we're sending them. And if they're an agency that has a very small pipe or only needs 4 images and not 2,800, they can just pick the one image they want and download it, or they can grab and go and take everything they want. So again, this agency delivery, which we did end up building with the vendor, was really a byproduct of just, okay, we have our archive already. Now, how do we leverage that archive to get out to our talent and our agencies? So this is an agency solution that we use it for. This is our talent approval solution. Again, leveraging the archive. We've done our edit, and now we have to send content out to talent. The screen on the left shows that we send everything out to talent as approved, and we require the talent to kill the material. And it's a very simple interface that is iPhone enabled, where they can say thumbs up, thumbs down, and it puts a green or red box around it. So now what we've done is we've built the archive right here. We've we've sent assignments out. We've built our archive here in this photo. We've now distributed our content to our ad agencies with no additional overhead other than just typing somebody's name in an email and attaching this link. And then we've done our talent approval. So we've done all this collaboration in a digital workflow or digital ecosystem. And then we get to here, and it comes time to tag the photography. So you'll see here, if you can see my pointer, oops, right here where my pointer is, it says Focus ID 787225. Okay? If you remember the script that I showed you earlier, it actually showed who played who. By typing in 787225, it gives me the unique ID to the script database for that unique episode. And it pre-populates talent and character. So I build a very succinct, controlled vocabulary, which enables my digital asset management search, and it enables several other things. What I'm showing you here is the bottom right-hand screen where it says Library Editor. That is our DAM view, our digital asset management view, and the upper left is our HBO Go view. Because as a company, we all got our heads together and said, by having a talent database, multiple departments can utilize this. The Go team can utilize it, the library team can utilize it, and again, we create better searches, better archives, and much better solutions for the company. In doing this, and by using an assignment and then a unique ID, we went down from 38 fields of metadata to only tagging cast talent. And when I say only tagging, we don't have to type anything. We just put checkboxes here. And when we put checkboxes in, it tags the people's name in the image. So again, we have no manual typing, which is why when Cynthia decided to work for our archive team in the studio, I didn't replace her metadata head because we just didn't need it. We didn't have that need anymore. So this is ultimately what it looks like when it gets to our digital asset management application. So all that metadata that we captured along the way, and again, whoops, right here, if you see focus ID, everything pivots on, again, our focus ID. And when I mentioned to you here on this screen, if I have 2 checkboxes here, if everyone can see that, it shows Sophie Turner and Kit Harington in the photo. By having 2 checkboxes, this system, which we pass off to, knows it's a 2-shot. If it was 1 checkbox, it would be a single. And if it was more than 2 checkboxes, it would be a group shot. By by leveraging dynamic metadata, it allowed us to create byproducts of controlled vocabulary when it got to our DAM, better search when it got to our DAM, and other things. Now, the screen also shows you metadata, legal metadata, media relations metadata, and photo metadata. HBO has a 3-point checkpoint system. Checkpoint 1 is my staff confirms that we've cleared it with talent and photo metadata is accurate. We have our legal team check it off that our legal metadata is accurate, and we have our media relations team tag it. If you go to the media relations category, you can see this image says recommended that I'm circling under. This says recommended. Others may say metadata media relations complete, no. So if it doesn't have the right category and the right yeses, we don't service it up to other systems at HBO. But because we created automation through metadata and through digital workflows, we can then automate this. So if anything has what I call the 3 yeses, the legal yes, the photo yes, and the MR yes, it automatically goes to our international systems, our publicity B2Bs. Again, leveraging DAM solutions and DAM technology, but really leveraging metadata to drive some of our workflows. So that just takes you through a little bit of that. Just the fun side of what we do all the digital retouching. So we'll take a 2-shot like you have in the before, and we'll remove people so it doesn't become a scene spoiler. We do a lot of internal production. So we do all the branding. We shoot a lot of the other material, and HBO just won 16 Emmys at this year's Emmys, so we're happy about that. We do plate shots, we do photography, we bring it into social media, so some other little campaigns that we do. And ultimately, very similar to what Netta said, we have to ultimately slice and dice this and get this out to all of our other platforms. So HBO has determined that all of our photography can drive from a 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratio, and by doing that, we can dynamically create all these other platforms. So we know that Xbox or Go or Android has a certain aspect ratio, and what we do is from the 4:3 or 16:9, we dynamically make those other solutions off of our DAM. So that's kind of it. There's my contact info if anybody wanted it, and I wanted to pass it over back to Netta and David, and also leave ample time for folks that might have questions.
Netta, over to you. And Karen, thank you for that walkthrough. It's so fascinating to see the maturation of workflows all built on DAM and its many variants, and also software that's kind of in the adjacency that you've harnessed and captured good application for. So we'll switch the presenter over to Netta here, and we'll return to her. Netta, over to you.
Our 2 goals in DAM is, first of all, to streamline operations, and great to hear how this was done in HBO. Thank you, Karen. And the second part from my side is to tell you a little bit more about how you can improve the user experience to complete the asset lifecycle. So basically, why do we care about user experience? In the sense, if users don't enjoy your experience, then they won't return, or they'll be less likely to buy if it's an e-commerce website or publishing. Media has become a very central part of user experience. I mean, there's less text and more media, a lot more images and videos to convey a message. I think that Karen mentioned 30% higher interest when more media is involved. So actually, this media needs to look good and needs to load fast. Otherwise, user will simply leave. They won't be waiting for things to load if it takes too long. So it has a direct impact on user engagement and on conversion rates. Regarding impacting engagement, if we take a publisher, for example, the customers use any device. So we have smartphones and tablets with significant traffic, as well as other devices. And the experience for different devices reinforces each other usually. So it needs to be designed differently, and you shouldn't have to compromise the way it looks in each device. So if we take a specific look at images, then they should be optimized and they should look great on every screen. And if we're back to responsive, then they could also have different aspect ratios and sizes. And we also need to make sure that we're focusing on the interesting parts of the image, and not necessarily do we have people who can go over everything and make sure that all the images are cropped perfectly. So earlier I mentioned that there's less text and more media, but that also takes time to load, and it has impact on results. So for example, any page that takes 2 seconds slower to load can result in a 4% drop in revenue per user, or a drop in searches per user in Google, or even up to 9% drop in page traffic according to Yahoo. So what's a good load time? For load time, we can say that anything below 2 seconds is great, and below 5 is also acceptable. So how do we optimize the performance, and why is media so important in that optimization? Media accounts for over 63% of the downloaded bytes in a web page. So, and this number is just going up all the time because video is becoming more and more dramatic and a larger component in effect. So we have a lot to improve, and if we save here, then we can result in significant improvement. So optimization, how do we optimize? We have different aspects that we can tackle. One of them is choosing the right format, and other options are experimenting with quality settings, and of course, as we mentioned before, serving the right resolution, making sure that you scale your images to the right size that they take or require on the device. A little bit more into that, format. For example, every type of image has an optimal format, and some of formats are more efficient than others, but they're not necessarily supported on all browsers and devices. So WebP is great. It can reach to 30% file reduction, but it's only supported on Chrome. So you also have to be smart in the aspect of the delivery and make sure that you match it to the right device. That's for format. In terms of quality, the images here look identical to us, but the image on the right is actually weighs half of the one on the left, and it requires therefore half the bandwidth, so it loads much faster. And there are smart techniques that allow us to decide how aggressive we can be when we choose the right encoding and compression. So we may actually want to compress as much as we can, but without the human eye noticing this. And this amount is actually different depending on the content of the image. So one image we could reduce without having, we can maybe compress more than another. And there are ways to do this in a smart way based on the content of the image. Size. Regarding size, we have, for example, on a large screen, we want to deliver a larger image to make it look good, but for a smaller screen, it's kind of a waste. So a smaller image would make the page load faster, and in smartphone, it's even more important because people usually are kind of busy and have less time when they're browsing their phone. So in this case, the example here, we can see that an image can be much scaled down to give the exact same experience in terms of the image quality, but it would actually load faster. So all of these are actually great ways to optimize. I mean, we've mentioned format and quality and size, but actually as a marketer or as a person who manages the content, you really don't want to actually do all this stuff. I mean, it's kind of too technical. So, but we do want a solution that would handle both the aesthetics and the performance side. So you could get any image in any format, and any size, and if possible on the fly. And in that sense, I think that the ideal DAM would have a solution for this behind the scenes. So you don't actually want to do it. You want a smart solution to do it for you. And that's it. I think I'll hand over back to David.
Okay, terrific. Well, we've had some interesting questions come in, and thank you both for your preparation for this and for the material. One question we came in, and Karen, I think we'll start with you, but it certainly has a stem to it in what you were just saying about knowing the dynamic weight of an asset. And Karen, let's start with you. Do you see hesitation with your photo editors to work in a cloud-based solution versus working on local servers? As you were transitioning, if there was pushback, how did you manage that?
Absolutely. So the answer is I have seen challenges and there has been pushback, but there's also been a tremendous benefit. So let me tell you the challenge. The challenge is that it's a cloud collaboration tool. It's excellent for being an archive. It's excellent for sending content in large volumes, 2,000 images to 50,000 images to 2 images, all in batches. It's fantastic for all of that, but it's not an editing tool. And so that is a challenge, and it is something that my staff, it took a lot of happy hours and some heart-to-hearts with what the benefits were with them to kind of get through it. So there's definitely a challenge. On a positive note, we're working very closely with our IT department and the vendor to kind of formulate a next generation into an editing tool, and we did create some very small workarounds to make that happen. But let me talk about the benefits. By having your archive in one place, and then having your agency be delivered in one place, and then having talent do their approvals in one place, and having your edits in one place, it allowed us so much more flexibility to kind of see the life of where the assets were and how much content we had and all the other things. So while could be modestly painful at times if you have a lot of talent for talent approvals, and I could explain why, it can be difficult editing. We use it for every show editing except Game of Thrones, and by taking Game of Thrones out of that workflow and using Photo Mechanic, it actually creates a whole nother set of challenges because we lose the digital footprint of talent, the digital footprint of what legal and media relations said. So to try to answer the question succinctly, it definitely took some adoption by my staff. It definitely is not as fluid as we would want in the editing area, but it created so many other opportunities around metadata and synchronization that it doesn't make sense to take every one of our shows out of the system into Photo Mechanic and back in, because you're almost re-importing a new asset.
Great. Netta, do you have a perspective on this when you're involved in looking at features and more fundamental kind of subterranean architecture for what will be in the application?
Sorry?
Just some perspectives on persuasive techniques for making sure that that some of the early concerns and worries about cloud were handled and some of the current ones will be handled.
Specifically regarding cloud, I think that there's not much that can be done except assuming that people are learning to trust it more and more, and if you give the right security measures, then it could be adopted slowly. Another aspect of that is making sure that everything is very comfortable and seamless to use. So in that sense, it could also help.
Okay. We had an interesting question come in. It was somebody who was watching the really fun graphics, Netta, in the slides that you prepared, and then in the kind of the complexities and the tradition of what Karen inherited, and kind of a bewildering set of workflows that she brought a Visio discipline to, and then a literal discipline. And the question was asked of both of you, and it's, okay, we see the benefit of this, we're going to change, and the question is, how do you see, in your case, Netta, how do you see good socialization around change when adopting this complicated software? And then they phrased it slightly different, Karen, for you about how did you begin to socialize this around HBO and what were a couple of the lessons learned along that way. So Netta, why don't we start with you? You're a product manager, you listen to a lot of clients. What are a couple tips and tricks about socializing change and the use of DAM as a discipline?
I think that the trick is probably to make it as similar as possible to the way people have worked, in the sense that if you make them work less, or save the tedious part of the job, and not the important aspects of it, so it would actually free their time to do other things. I think that would be the benefit that could help people adopt a better workflow. Of course, it's a very it's not very simple to change your day-to-day operations, but I think this is something that perhaps if people are more involved in the process and actually making the decisions while it's assimilated within the organization, it's something that if you're a part of it, then you're easier. It would be easier for a person to adopt it. So I think that's an important part, actually. Hearing what people's expectations from this process are and making sure that they follow through when, the expectations are answered by the way that the DAM is implemented.
And I think we had talked in a couple of our rehearsals for the webinar also about the idea of, for lack of a better word, checking back post-implementation audits and trying to be sure to tie back to those expectations that are set during demonstrations to the ever-present dynamic of, well, this just changed since we ordered the software. And I know you've got some good disciplines around that we talked about. Karen, over to you on that interesting question. You inherited a lot of opportunity to socialize change at HBO, and that was part of the reason you joined them. What are a couple tips and tricks along the way as you've evolved to the current workflow?
Well, I think we went with bite, chew, swallow very slowly. So, it was just, we didn't try to boil the ocean. And a lot of people say, well, you're HBO and you have huge budgets and you have a large team and all these things. And to be honest, we have some of the same challenges that other organizations have. We do have a lot of opportunity afforded to us, but we do have some of the same challenges at hand as well. And we didn't try to boil the ocean. First challenge was like, what problem are we trying to solve? Like, where's our assets? So it was really like going back to that eye chart of like the swim lanes. It was like, what challenges are we trying to solve? And really, when I say bite, choose, swallow, like what's the little pieces? It was like, okay, we have this business challenge that we have 500 hard drives running around the company and my staff had to do everything manually. And then it was like looking at our infrastructure and seeing what tools we had in place. We already had a cast talent database in place that that other departments were using, just Photo wasn't using them. So it was like what tools were in place, and that was sort of putting on my IT hat a little bit. What tools in place, and what was the low-hanging fruit? So the low-hanging fruit was we already had a DAM in place. That DAM served as an amazing storefront, but my staff had all this other stuff we had to do with no digital fingerprint on it. No way to really track what talent looked at without going back to a physical binder. No way to push an asset out outside of business hours because we had to log into a fob, into a VPN, into all these things. So I think it was really just stepping back and trying to figure out the little pieces. And what I showed you has taken the greater part of 4 years. And in some cases, we did all this in year 2 and 3, because year 1 was understanding the business challenge. Year 2 was really writing an RFP to make a selection on a cloud-based tool, and then the other part of year 2 was really, okay, we've made this selection. What do we already have around the company so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? There's already a system that leverages Focus ID and has all this rich metadata in it. There's already a system that has a cast talent in it. There's already a DAM in place. So what are the pieces we had to cobble together in between that? And then working with the vendors, working with internal, and then to the question that was asked earlier, change management. How do we get people to do a change management? So that was sort of the challenge at hand for that. But I think we didn't try to boil the ocean. and we tried to show substantial small wins along the way.
Karen, we're going to do a last question for both of you, flashcard style, and I'll start with you. What about when an asset has reached end of life and needs to be retired? If you could give a quick insight on that.
Sure. We have something in our cloud-based tool, which is an Amazon backend of hot and cold storage. So when an asset has reached end of life, we put it in cold storage, and it becomes a digital asset in our archive. And we're storing it at pennies on the dollar, literally like 2 cents an asset, less than that. And so we just put it into cold storage.
The salt mine of the modern era. And Netta, how about you? Do you have a perspective on when an asset has reached end of life and needs to be retired?
I mean, regarding retirement, it could be for different reasons. I mean, it could be something that you'd want to retire because legally it has to be retired. It could be something that you're setting a removal date for, and you want to eventually take it off the shelf. In both cases, I think there's a difference between removing from like a published asset or removing it entirely and archiving it. In the sense of archiving, there are also options of like doing some auto tracking on seeing which assets are being used and optimizing it, optimizing your archive. And also what Karen mentioned before regarding the difference between assets that you'd want to place in like a secondary storage. It's something that's less, like, still available for recovery if you need it. But can be recovered.
Great. Listening to the two of you this morning, I'm so reminded of a fascinating sentence I read in Thomas Friedman's piece in the New York Times today, where he wrote, "We're going through a change in the climate of technology and work. We're moving into a world where computers and algorithms can analyze, reveal previously hidden patterns, optimize, tell a plane what altitude to fly each mile to get the best fuel efficiency, prophesize, tell you when your elevator will break or what your customer might be interested in, customize, tailor products or services for you alone, and digitize and automize more and more products and services." He concludes with the statement that any company that does not deploy all 6 elements will struggle, and this is changing every job and every industry. Those of us who worked in the profession of digital asset management and benefited from hearing these two presentations this morning can affirm and amplify on each of those. And I want to thank each of you for your insights in helping us along that journey of looking at the climate of change in technology and in work. This concludes the webinar. Please join us at the Henry Stewart Conference in Los Angeles in November, and at any time in the Continuing Professional Development Room, where we get to hear from so many leaders in our profession. Thank you and good day.